Okay, so the Yankees made a massive trade. So they got rid of Sanchez, praise God, and Urshela, and they got Josh Donaldson, Falefa, and Workfit. So what do you think, Jonathan?
Just to start off, the acquisition of Josh Donaldson is pretty big. I think people are kind of overlooking just because he hasn't been at the MVP level like the past year or two. Like this is still a productive player. Last year he put up 2.2 WAR, and that was in about 130 games. He batted 247, which is a little bit low, but not a big deal. 352 on base. The Yankees have struggled with on base in the past few years, so that's an asset. And he slugged 476. So he fits in with the Yankees' right-handed slugger mentality, and he's going to be just fine at third base. He's not a liability or anything. Gio Urshela is he's better at third, but it's not like the biggest deal in the world. So I mean, I guess the only kind of criticism you could have with picking him up is the contract. I believe he's getting paid $23 million a year for the next 2 years. But I mean, when you talk about the Yankees, that shouldn't really be a huge deal. I think that can always be moved.
I don't think it even matters because looking at what the Mets and Dodgers are spending, the Yankees kind of have to keep up right now.
Yeah,
there's the Mets entering that big two zone. It was two teams, like no one else. Maybe the Red Sox here and there, but
depends on the year. Yep.
Now there's three teams that will spend that high, and the fact that the Mets are one of them, the Yankees kind of realize they have to bump up their money because of local competition.
Yeah, definitely.
But just a reminder, Josh Donaldson, former catcher.
My guy.
Falefa, a catcher.
Yep.
Somewhat. He hasn't played in a while, but catcher. And Workfit, a catcher.
Yeah, the Yankees love catchers.
Yeah, must love catchers and former catchers.
Yeah. So speaking of Falefa, so this guy he won a Gold Glove playing third base a couple years back, but he's going to be brought in to play shortstop for the Yankees. So that hole's being filled. Shortstop was probably the biggest need for the team this offseason. People connected the Yankees to Carlos Correa and Trevor Story. But I think the Yankees, from what I've heard, never really were going to spend that high level what Correa or even what Seager wanted. $300 million just wasn't something they were going to do, especially because the way they feel about Anthony Volpe, who's people say could be coming up by the end of this year, next year by the latest. They feel like he can really be a star at shortstop. So I don't think they felt it was worth it to spend $300 million and move that guy to third base when you have someone like Volpe coming up. And just the player himself, he's an okay hitter and he's a really strong defender. And I think the Yankees really struggled up the middle last year defensively. I mean, you had Gleyber Torres there, who's just a plain bad defender. So I think they get an upgrade there. So that's pretty big.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, former Gold Glover. Solid hitter. He's a triple threat. I mean, he can hit a few triples. I'm looking at his stats now. Compared to the ratio at home runs, it looks like he's a triples guy.
Yeah.
He walks a decent amount, not a lot, but you know what? The Yankees, they don't really need a guy to walk a lot right now. They kind of need some batting average.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
And he's a 280 hitter, 270 hitter. So
He kind of reminds me of LeMahieu a little bit.
Yeah, it is a little
not to the same degree.
Well, utility infielder who can hit a little bit. Yeah.
He also brings that speed element too that the Yankees have been lacking.
He stole 20 bases.
He's got athleticism. So that's a big one for the Yankees.
Yeah, he certainly fits the role.
Yeah, and the last guy they picked up, Ben Rortvedt, he's a AAA catcher. As of right now, he'd be the Yankees' backup catcher. He's a lefty, so I anticipate him forming a platoon with Kyle Higashioka. Higashioka will probably pick up the majority of the starts. He's very well liked with the pitching staff, but I see Rortvedt being that secondary guy, maybe like 60 starts a year. I don't know if that's the best move, but that's just kind of the way it's looking right now. I mean, the way it's looking,
you could have been insurance for a future move just in case they're not able to pull in a big name catcher going forward.
Yeah, and I mean also the Yankees haven't really had any strong catchers in the minor league system. Like they have good players who play catcher, but guys who can't play catcher at the major league level. Like Austin Wells, for example, he's a really strong bat, but scouts don't think he can play catcher. He'd probably be a left fielder or a DH.
Mhm.
So the Yankees kind of needed somebody in the system that can just be a backup long term. So, I mean, I think in that respect, it's a good pickup. But I think the Yankees they're just kind of living with the fact that they're not going to get much offense out of the catcher this year. I think they're hoping they get strong production everywhere else and rebounds from some of the guys who struggled last year.
Now, looking at Sanchez's stats real quick,
Mhm.
he still had power going into his last year with the Yankees.
Mhm.
He hit 23 last year in 380 at bats. He would have still hit 30 something, 40 even. He's a guy that can hit that number, I think, eventually.
Yeah.
I mean, he's hit a peak of 34
Yep.
and
That was like
in 400 at
17.
bats. 400 at bats. So I mean, he can get to that number. He can get to 40. If you played full time at catcher, which the Yankees were never going to do with him,
Yeah.
because the pitching staff just didn't like him.
Yeah. That speaking of that, I just saw like a report earlier this morning. Some scouts said when the pitching staff heard out about the trade, they celebrated. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but I think I could definitely see it happening though. I mean,
I
Garrett Cole, he basically refused to pitch to Gary Sanchez.
I mean, could you blame him?
Yeah, I mean,
The guy,
Gary
the guy,
Sanchez,
he couldn't frame anything. He couldn't really block much. All he could do was throw, and then even then, it wasn't quite there the whole time.
he was just too inconsistent. He had some really high highs, but the lows were just they were just too low when it came down to it. And I think the Yankees were always willing to move on for this kind of upgrade if it became available.
Mhm.
And I think they had to reshuffle somehow, definitely for sure. And I think this is probably the best way to do it.
Do you think it's a better move than simply of just signing a Trevor Story to a 1 year deal? Let's say a big money 1 year deal.
Well, I mean, in a vacuum, you'd probably want them to go for Trevor Story, but I think and maybe 20, 30 years ago, the Yankees of old would have done that. But I think we're starting to see that the Yankees are operating like the other 29 teams in the league, where they're very conscious of the luxury tax and just paying, these high salaries in general. Where I think they're just realizing, we have two really good shortstop prospects that we feel really good about, and we don't want to spend at that position when we think we can get cheap, cost-controlled talent coming up in the next few years. So I think that's
When's
kind
the
of their
last time the
mentality.
Yankees have been over the luxury tax?
2 years ago, I think for Garrett Cole, they went over. Yeah, but the thing about that is, you have to remember the year before that they went under the luxury tax because they wanted to avoid the repeat offender tax. I think it's like they added, I don't know, 20% um, on every dollar over. So even in that regard, the Yankees, they weren't, even though they went over, they weren't, really big spenders the way they used to be. Like, for example, I mean, the Mets, you anticipate the Mets aren't going to worry about having to go under the tax to try to avoid that. They're just going to blow through it. And the Dodgers, too. You don't see that from them either. So,
So I mean, and here's the other issue now. You got the Steve Cohen tax.
yeah.
No one's gonna. I mean, Cohen might have been the guy to actually go that far. Like at least for a year or two, because it looks like as if he signed Scherzer to that 3 year deal,
Hmm.
right? The full intention right now with the Mets is that these 3 years, they're just gonna blow all the money away, and then after that, then they're gonna have prospects to take over. Now the Yankees, they might have to. They're in a weird position because they're not quite. They're a good team still,
Oh,
and
for
they're,
sure.
they're clearly a team that's gonna at least be a wild card contender. You have
Especially
to.
with the expanded playoff.
Yeah, you're gonna have to deal with the Tampa Bay Rays. They're probably winning the division again. I mean,
Yeah. I'd be
unless
shocked if
unless they make like an analytical mistake and they're like, "Oops, we messed up on a player," and it's like a really bad move or
yeah.
something like that, which they're not gonna do. They're the best analytical team in baseball. They'll get it right. The Red Sox, I'm not worried.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, they're in the same tier as the Yankees, I think.
yeah,
Maybe a little better.
they're competitive, but it's a question of, are you really a contender? Like you have a team, it's playoff caliber, but is it elite? Is it a World Series contender? Or should you retool? Like seriously, the Yankees have. I mean, they have Stanton for forever.
Yeah, the Yankees they can't retool. They
They
have
can
too many
afford to.
guys. The prime is right. The window is now. Well, the window already passed, but if you're trying to extend it.
Yeah.
I think the Yankees, the way they're currently constructed right now, I'd be shocked if they made it to a World Series. I just don't see it. I mean, the pitching is okay, it's fine, but if if the hitters hit the way it did last year, the offense just isn't good enough to even win a division, to be honest with you. Now, let's say, Joey Gallo rebounds. Let's say Gleyber Torres finds his form, right? Rizzo, he had some moments, but he wasn't really like incredible last year. So if Rizzo is, back, because I'm assuming they're going to bring him back, because I'd be shocked if the Yankees get Matt Olson. I think the price is too high.
Go to the Cubs.
Yeah,
like,
right.
The opposite of the Chapman deal.
Yeah, yeah, but I think if those guys kind of rebound, and then with Donaldson, if he hits at a high level, I think maybe they have an outside shot. But even then, they probably have to make some kind of deadline addition to reinforce
Well,
things.
here's another option. In 2015, remember the sell-off?
Yeah.
And then they still made the playoffs, right, as a wild card team.
Mm-hmm.
What if they go into this season, they actually sign, let's say they sign a few relievers, right now.
Yeah.
And then they go into the season, they're competitive, and they aren't quite where they want to be. They're like, let's say a 500-ish team like they were last year by the deadline, and they decide to sell. So if they sell, and then they still can be competitive towards the end, maybe finish third in the division, maybe make the wild card, right? And then the year after, 2 years after, they get top prospects coming up again. They could replenish that. Their prospect pool is already pretty good.
Yeah, it's like top 10, I think.
It's not like, best in the league, but it's there.
Yeah.
But it's kind of heavily on Volpe right now.
Yeah, and the other shortstop, Peraza.
Yeah.
Those are your studs, basically.
One of them has to be tradable, right? Peraza probably.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
I
think he's the better fielder.
I wouldn't touch Volpe right now.
Also, we can't forget about Jason Dominguez too.
He's a bit down the road, but yeah, he could possibly pop up soon. He could pop up soon. You never know.
Like the Juan Soto, right?
Yeah, Juan Soto situation. The days of those outfielders coming up really early, they're kind of slowing down a bit. But outfielders used to come up at 19, so I don't see why.
Mm-hmm.
Dominguez can certainly come up in a year or two, I think.
Yeah, if he came up in 2 years, that's not shocking to me. I think that's maybe even likely if he lives up to his billing. Now, in terms of what you said about the sell-off, I almost feel like the time for that was really last year. I felt like what you said about how being at around 500, I think the time was perfect for that last year, because I do think, while I don't think the Yankees right now are a World Series type team, I do expect some rebounding from the terrible batting performances last year. I don't see Gleyber Torres being, he was maybe like a 220, 230 hitter. I don't see that happening again. And I think Gallo is going to provide decent production. So I don't think that the Yankees are going to they'll be in this weird position where they're probably not good enough to compete with the race for the division, but they're probably not like a 3 or 4 team in the division either. So if you sell off at that point, it's kind of weird, because there's going to be fans clamoring to add, because I think if you add to what they have, there may be a chance of, competing with the Rays for the division. So I think the time was really last year when everyone knew they had no shot at the division.
The only way I can see this Yankees window working out is if they spend to the Mets level. They need a few more players, because honestly, here's the issue. Like, outside of catcher right now, there aren't really obvious major holes outside of first base also. But first base, you assume it's Rizzo.
Yeah. And then, you also have to think, they have Voit there, but if they bring in Rizzo, I think Voit's going to be traded. So you have to think about what he could net back. I think he can get maybe a 5th starter or a good reliever in return.
He might be, this is a little bit out there, but what about a Josh Hader trade?
It's interesting.
A Voit Peraza centerpiece package, maybe? I don't know if you're going to need both of them, but, some part of it that could work out as a basis of a package. One of those two.
The thing is, that's interesting, but I feel like the Yankees, if they're going to make that kind of splurge where you give up Peraza, I think it's got to be for a starting pitcher. I think. I don't know who's out there right now, but maybe that'll become clearer as we get towards the deadline. But
the Mets picked up Bassett just now, right? And honestly, it didn't cost as much as you would think. Like, they gave up one of their top five prospects and a guy who probably would have been on the fringe top 100, maybe, but he wasn't elite. Like he's a future third middle of the
Yeah.
rotation starter. It's not like they gave up, Matt Allen, a future ace.
Hmm.
Now, if that's the cost for a pretty good starting pitcher, I mean, Bassett was a Cy Young contender at times, right?
Hmm.
So why? I mean, the Yankees could probably get a decent starter for Voit alone.
Yeah, I think so.
He probably has similar value to Dom Smith right now.
Yeah, I could see that. I think Voigt's probably a better hitter slightly, but I guess Dom, he in a pinch you could play him in the outfield, so it might give him a little bit more value. But I think it evens out. I think Voigt's a little bit better of a bat, and then like I said, Dom can flex out to the outfield a little bit.
Yeah, I think the Yankees are not in a horrible spot. They're definitely better off than most teams. And
Yeah.
they have the money where if they really see something, they could probably just get it. Like if they wanted Correa, like really wanted him,
Yeah.
they'd give him a Lindor contract if they really wanted him. He doesn't deserve
Hmm.
it. I don't think to come to New York, if they give him
Yeah.
that after being on the
It,
Astros for all those years also.
yeah.
He,
It was never a great fit. I don't think.
yeah.
Just like you said, the Astros thing it was already kind of tough.
Yeah, I mean, Donaldson alone might have some issues fitting in, but
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to give someone $300 million, you almost have to be perfect for the
yeah,
team itself. Like Lindor, he didn't have any kind of baggage like that
no.
coming into it. So
Well,
maybe
we
for
have
a
the
different team, it'd be different. But
we had
yeah,
the squirrel incident.
yeah,
But that wasn't really an incident. They kind of settled it like internally, and then
yeah,
it was like fine. It wasn't like Bryce Harper going crazy in a dugout. Those
yeah,
situations.
yeah. That feels like this for a long time ago.
Yeah. John with Papabon, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was
I
crazy.
don't hear that name anymore.
But yeah, the Yankees aren't in a bad spot. They just have to figure it out. I mean, they're so close, but yet it feels like there's a whole massive jump because they need to get to this top tier, but they're not quite there. And that's a hard tier to jump. It's like going from good to great. That's the
Mm-hmm.
hardest tier to jump. He's going from like bad or horrible to decent when you're a team with money. That's not that hard. You just sign a few free agents and someone's going to work out.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially like you look at the top tier teams right now, the Mets, Dodgers, Yankees. I can't see any of them only winning like 60 games for more than 2 years in a row anymore.
Yeah, it's so easy just to spend out of it.
Like they can have a bad year, but they could just go in and spend massive money if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not a it's not a good spot necessarily to be in because you're not sure of what you are, but they could figure it out. They probably already know what their moves are. If they're trading for Donaldson,
Yeah.
they kind of know they're a contender.
There's probably some other stuff that's coming up that we don't know about just yet. But I think overall the trade is good. They had to reshuffle something because they couldn't just run it back with last year's team. That's unacceptable. So it's good to see that they changed things up. See how it works, with the locker room and see kind of how guys rebound from last year, and maybe they'll be in a position where they'll have a shot at making a run in the playoffs once they get in there.
All right.
Yep.
That's it. See you guys on the next one.